Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to a particularly interesting little series. This is the story of Luke. The prologue. I think everyone I play with these days is a that guy. Just more the awesome kind and less the fuck up the session and get everyone annoyed type. That said, over the years I've had the pleasure of three of these guys. The first we'll call Luke, for it was his name. He was housemates with my friends in first and second year at university, and I had the misfortune of living with him in the third. He was pretty much the stereotypical worst case that guy Neckbeard. To call him repellent would have been doing an injustice. He had an odor that preceded him by several minutes. His teeth, quite literally, were green. In the year I lived with him, he never showered once. Never washed, never cleaned up after himself, never did the dishes, never shaved, nothing. You could see people edge away from him as he entered the room. You could actually see the moment the smell violated their scent receptors. Their face would freeze in horror. He moved out of our house the day before the contract expired. We had never seen the inside of his room until this point, I'll add. None of us could brave the odor. We insisted he kept his door shut. As we were finishing moving out, I heard a scream from one of the girls who was moving in, and I went, all chivalrous-like, to investigate. I was not prepared for what was in that room. The smell, even after my other housemate had opened the window in there the day before, was appalling. You could see stuff hanging in the air from the light that filtered in through windows caked with handprints. There was still filth everywhere in there. The carpet must have been inch thick with shed hair, bits of food, discarded wank rags, discarded wrappers. It was disgusting. Weirdly, there were wood shavings under the window where he appeared to have been gnawing on the windowsill. What had made this girl scream, however, was that she had gone to flip the mattress, presumably in the hopes that the remains of Luke would be as far from her body as possible. It looked like Luke had done that first to conceal, well, there was a stain. A huge, rancid, black stain. About crotch height. About a foot around. No, more like 3 foot around. I don't know what the fuck he did. If he shit himself or what. But it was terrifying. The only time I ever saw Luke clean was when his evidently long-suffering parents picked him up for weekends. He returned looking slightly thinner and paler, red raw and clean-shaven. My guess is they put him out back and blasted him with a pressure hose. The parents were really nice. How they spawned him, I have no idea. They were also really, really rich. Meaning this kid was spoiled as high fuck, and he loved to use it to one-up people. I remember saving most of my money to buy a new computer. At the time, it was top of the line. I was proud of fucking hell of it. Took a massive chunk of my money, but God, it was glorious. I felt like the king of the fucking internet. People coming around just to bask in the glory. It was fantastic. 3 days later, Luke turns up, looks all interested in it. The next fucking day, his parents have bought him almost exactly the same computer, with a larger monitor, better surround, and at his insistence, all those tacky little mods that just make you sick. Gold-plated, premium brand cables, more LEDs than you can handle, all that shit. I'll point out at the time his computer hadn't really been much worse than mine. He just couldn't stand not having the best one. This repeated itself later when I got a laptop. I blew all my money on the one that was the best that I could afford. His parents bought him an Alienware. I'm now having horrible flashbacks of his keyboard and mouse, and of the time I went to play something on Media Player on his computer and saw his file history. This guy must have gotten off on being that dirty. The best bit? The very best bit? He's studying to become a doctor. He's also a consummate liar. He just seemed to be unable to tell the truth. Even to the simplest things. He would come out with stories. Some of Luke's stories were legendary, but the one that sticks with me is the time he won £30,000 at a Counter-Strike tournament, but he had to give it back because they found out he had been wall hacking. I digress. This should be about how he's that guy related. Well, he played Magic the Gathering for a start, and his decks were almost invariably terrible. He had a hard-on for Samurai during Kamigara, but played them incredibly defensively. He'd dump 30 creatures and then just kind of sit there. He had a hard-on for Cumulox during the Mirrodin. He'd literally throw one in every deck running. He'd make up the rules for a card, have to query every card by grabbing it off the table, leaving horrible, horrible marks on it. We actually have one somewhere that has his fingerprints permanently marked into the paper from whatever the hell was on his hands at the time. Then he'd forget what it did within 30 seconds, and he'd have to do it again. He would constantly try to do things that were mind-numbingly obviously wrong. I cast Terror onto Pit Trap was the big one that sticks with me. Mostly because he tried it 8 fucking times. It was like everything you told him was a square peg for a round hole. Somehow information just did not relay itself from the real world into his brain. We did manage to take advantage of his annoying habit of picking up cards during one game with Unhinged. We had that card that does you damage when you touch it. The guy playing the deck puts on these big rubber gloves and plays it. Luke immediately reaches over, grabs it, reads it, puts it down on his side of the table, picks it up again to look at it, then puts it down again, then realizes it's on the wrong side of the table, slides it back. Next round, he picks it up again, just to check. His redeeming feature is that it meant that you never came in last in a multiplayer game. He also played D&D. Yeah, he even DM'd. Once. He was a huge weeaboo. Every character had flowing hair and katanas, and I'm sure he tried at least once to have one with wings. And the one that had skin color normal listed on the sheet was something that made the entire table crack up when it came to light. He'd make his stats and modifiers. His character sheet would bear no resemblance to anything even remotely like rules, and of all the various numbers listed, would be completely unrelated to one another. He would literally roll a dice, and then say another random number any time that he was called to do anything. It got to the point where one DM sat him down, walked him through the entirety of character creation again, based on the classes he had listed, and ended up having to pretty much adjust everything about him. He's about 8 levels higher than us, had 2 stats that implied he rolled a 19, extra feats, all kinds of shit. Still, he just made up numbers whenever the fuck he felt like it. It was this occasion where we saw the inside of his character folio, though. He had this little black book that he used for character sheets, and he'd sit during sessions, leaned back with a pencil, book folded up like he was fairly obviously writing things surreptitiously. But we just ignored it as him being fucking weird. Turns out he'd been drawing. Porn, actually. He'd been drawing porn, very bad porn, of Dizzy from Guilty Gear, and werewolves, and pretty much everything you see on the ass end of DeviantArt. And there were pages that were stuck together, or smeared from him obviously having stroked them. Shit makes me cringe just thinking about it. Thank you all for watching. If you're enjoying this, and you want to keep the lights on in this place, you can donate to my Patreon, or You can buy stuff from the merch store. And if you have your own stories, they don't necessarily have to be Neckbeard related. Any crazy thing you think would be fun for me to read, you can send it to r/Moonhorse Stories. I check it every day. The links to everything that I have talked about and more is in the description down below. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Goodbye!